Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. It was always, obviously, thinking back to events probably, 2 years ago, it was always the after lunch session that was a challenge, but following Jackie is clearly going to be quite a difficult thing, how to feel very inadequate on a Tuesday afternoon. So really, I'm just sort of trying to give a sort of light-hearted view of my perspective on transformation. So as we talked about there, I joined Santander in January to lead a transformation across the organisation. It's my fourth one now, so I'm obviously quite interested in the subject. And there's a number of firsts today. So firstly, it's my first hybrid event that I've actually spoke at, so there's a first. And also, I was looking today, other than one meeting last week, this is you are the first people I have interacted with on a business basis for 586 days. So it actually got me out. Obviously, decided to smarten up on the top, but not so much on the bottom. So I'll just move on. So procurement people, I think we love a transformation. So probably there are lots of speakers today who will be talking about different transformations. So I looked at the definition. And so we've got here a complete change in the appearance or character of something or someone, especially so that thing or person is improved. And I think the key bit for me is the improved. And although I'm interested in how Gary looked in his tuxedo, it's really about the mixed feelings that people have within transformations and how do you bring everybody with you. So even though we all love a transformation, actually they're quite difficult. The square peg and round hole analogy, I think, is a very good one. As I said, this is the fourth one I've done, one in media, FMCG, pharmaceutical, and now financial services. And every company is different, every industry is different. There isn't a one-size-fits-all. So, and trying to push that square peg in that round hole just still doesn't work. So you've got to try and refine how that we look at that. So change, as I said, change is difficult. I think we all appreciate that. But personally, and we'll go on to my sort of own behavioural aspects and my personality, that it's not changing, which is really the fatal part, sitting with the status quo. So people do still push back from change, so for a number of reasons. Fear of the unknown, so people like the past, and as I said, I joined Santander in January, and I think what I've seen is financial services probably has been more risk averse over the years, and therefore there has been a lot of stability. Communication, I think, is a very, very difficult thing, if I'm honest. I think you either communicate too little, or even if you think you've over-communicated, it's still, you don't quite get the right audience there. Loss of control, people, I mean, often from a procurement perspective, and I'll go on to some of what we're doing in Santander at the moment, that loss of control makes people feel very vulnerable. We're coming in and saying, actually, the way we've done it previously isn't quite right. So obviously drives a lot of pushback. Previous experiences, people will tar you with the brush of, well, this didn't work 3 years ago, got nothing to do with how I'm intending on doing it, but you do get tarred with that same brush. And then also having the right support model, and I'll also go into that. So in terms of, I'm going to look at it from 4 different pillars. I apologize if anybody saw this. I posted on LinkedIn recently and got a lot of interest from it. So 4 key pillars really is think big and really about curiosity. Get shit done. So apologies for language, but it kind of works better than we're delivering things. That doesn't really have the same ring about it. Have fun. So actually, as I said, change can be difficult. You need a team who enjoy spending time together. That's obviously been a challenge for me personally, because I've not met a single person that I work with yet. In fact, the first time will be tomorrow. So we've got our first off-site event. And then also having the right mindset, because I think that is a critical success factor. So if I just look at each of these, so starting with think big. So I guess the reality is we've all seen different versions of this, but we all know that technology and change is at a pace that we've never experienced. So the reality is it should be a lot easier for us because, I'll give you an example, so tonight I'm staying near Tower Bridge, you've got the Tower of London there. That was a more challenging thing to me when it was built in the 1070s than actually us putting a source-to-pay platform in place. So in terms of actually the opportunities we've now got, the technologies we've got, we've got everything at our fingertips, so it should be easy. So first of all, I think when you think on the think big piece, I think it's about listening. You've obviously got to listen to the business. There is no point, going back to the square peg, round hole analogy, me trying to push something that would have worked in another organization because every organization is different, all the needs are different. Curiosity. So I think I'm in the process of recruiting quite a lot of people at the moment for our team, and I think curiosity is a key thing that I look for in people. So I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and you just have to sit there and listen to them and the games they play and some of the questions when they ask where babies have come from, and rather too curious for my liking. But it is sort of having that mindset of a 10-year-old about why does that happen, how does that happen, and really starting to dig into it. And I think it's a key skill in most procurement people now, but I think particularly in that transformation activity, you need to go and investigate. You need to see why things are done as they are, and really trying to, I guess, taking that onion analogy, unpeel layer after layer after layer. Have a story. So I think that is critical. Storytelling as well. From that, you've got to think about how do you start to connect with people in the business. So, as I said, I joined in January. We had to go to the Exco in May, in terms of then announcing our new operating model in June. But it was all about what's the story, how does that play into different arenas, and I can go on to that in a few minutes, but it's really about not just savings, not just about technology, but a very multifaceted approach from a risk management, supplier performance, supplier management, the inevitable savings that we do have to deliver as well, but really getting that story straight and how do you connect with people. And then the big one for me really is you think big and you get big. So I guess the best example of this, or best in the public world, is probably Elon Musk and Richard Branson, who both have probably missed target after target after target after target, but eventually Tesla are getting there from a delivery perspective. And I think my personal view is you may not get to what that original target was, but you'll get far, far more, and you'll get far higher than if you didn't have the big picture. So for example, in terms of what we're going through at the moment, which is why we're having our offsite tomorrow, and most of my team are quite nervous about it, we've upped our headcount by taking on a lot more scope by about 40%. So we've taken the whole end-to-end supplier life cycle. We've got 5 bits of technology we're putting in. We've got quite big savings targets. We now own all third-party risks, so building on Charlotte's presentation earlier. So there's a lot we have to do, and I'm fairly sure that we won't succeed on everything. And it will all be about how do we then start to prioritize, how do we keep the right balls in the air, because obviously in a very regulated environment, it's important to make sure that from a regulatory point of view and a risk point of view, that everything is managed. But clearly you can't achieve everything. But I think the key for me is you think big and you get big. And it also, as I'll go on to, it kind of fits in with my personality as well. Get shit done. So moving on to that, you need a plan. So I'm not, as I'll go on to, I'm not a great planner. So you need then to surround yourself with the people who do like to do things like plans, which I don't really like to do, or take notes, and various different things. You have to break a few eggs. So I think I am not apologetic for that whatsoever. You are not going to be always liked. You are not always going to have everyone as your best friend, and you will have to disrupt things. And I think even when times are quite challenging, I think making sure that you stay focused on what that end vision is, what the end solution is really quite critical. You need to deliver. So I think in my previous organization, we had an expression of looking down rather than looking up. So in pharmaceuticals, and probably is similar in financial services from what I've seen, lots of people like to look up, lots of people like the blue sky, not many people like to look down and actually go and deliver. And the reality is, if we can all do the pretty slides, we can come up with, this is what the operating model people are expecting us to deliver. And so it's really focusing on getting the shit done, ultimately, and making sure that that action backs up your words, because obviously that's how you get the credibility, that's how you're going to get the engagement within your organization. We love in procurement as well to measure things, so actually look at what that value proposition is. I think we all know that looking at cost is not the route to take. I mean, it is an inevitable driver that we all have, but it's not something, no organization ever was hugely successful simply by cutting costs. So it's actually how we then really influencing what customer-facing activity, really influencing efficiency, quality across the organization, but also measure it. Whether we like it or not, people have expected that procurement like to measure things, and therefore, if we're not measuring it, are we actually delivering it? So we've kind of backed ourselves into a corner after many years of telling people what savings we've made, and now it's about how do we take it to a much more intellectual level. The have fun part. So I think this is really critical during transformation, and as I said, it's been a challenge, if I'm honest, and it's probably something we'll talk about at length tomorrow. I haven't met anyone within my team. There's only so many quizzes we all enjoyed during COVID. We all got a little bit of quiz overload. So it's kind of, my personal view is it has to be bottom up as opposed to top down, and rather than being staged. So it's trying to see how we can have those interactions between groups. We're bringing in lots of new people, so it's not even as if you've got friendship groups who are then created. We are bringing in the new people as well. I guess the key is to ensure that this isn't how the team start to feel, because as I talked about earlier, we've got a lot going on, a lot of different activities, and it can become slightly overwhelming. And I think a key part of this is making sure that that support model is there, that people are there for each other. Like it said here, we kind of know where that engine is, we know how we're driving the engine, and we're putting that wrapper around all of the organization. And then, I mean, and this was very topical because we're actually something we're discussing tomorrow. There's obviously lots of different personality profile. This is one that Deloitte used, but having that diversity within the teams as well, and then it's something very big in my mind at the moment. So I personally am right at the top there in terms of decide quickly, brush off mistakes, call the shots, try it out, and embrace risk. You can't run a team with 100 of me. It would be chaos and slightly crazy to live in. So it's actually how do we start getting the diversity, and how do we start to use that group moving forward, and really try and design that in. So really trying to look at bringing the right skills in, but also bringing in those right personality types so that we have got the right balance there. I think balance is probably a key word. And in terms of just building on that, this is also a piece around tension. So there is, from a theory perspective, and I'm kind of a big believer in it, is that everybody's performance will increase due to a level of stress or pressure. The fact is we all have diminishing returns, but I think having that healthy tension, as it describes there, is quite important, because again, there's only so much, even if we were all together, there's only so much fun we can have by going out for dinner, going for beers, etc. You need people to actually enjoy what they're doing in their role as well, and actually really get energized by it and motivated by it. And really that's where that piece, I think the problem with me personally is I'm very far to the right-hand side, so I'm the person who finished this presentation 1 minute before we came on stage, not quite, but, and did my MBA dissertation the night before I was due to hand it in, etc. So I'm kind of very far to the right, whereas my wife is very far to the left, so we kind of clash sometimes on these things. She likes lists and notes and making sure that everything is very structured. And then go on to the mindset is everything. So I think we talked about the thinking big part, but I think it's also about having that clear vision of what it is we're trying to achieve, what it is we're going to deliver. So I'm a big sports fan, and I kind of, given this, as I said, this was the 4th transformation that I have led, this legacy of leaving the shirt in a better place than when you found it, of the New Zealand All Blacks, is kind of brilliant for me. I absolutely love that thought, because it's all about really how do I make sure that undoubtedly we have left things much better than it was before. And then also on the right-hand side, that ultimately there is no one bigger than the team. So actually it should be very much lead from the front, but I will get involved in anything that I would expect anyone in the team to do. And it's very much similar, and clearly the All Blacks have been quite good at rugby over the years, so made a huge success about it, but it's how they come together as that team and leaving that legacy. I think this relevancy, so again, it's been something on my mind a lot recently, where we're sort of thinking about how do we make sure, as I said earlier, we connect with the business, we connect with people within our organization. And I'm not a massive fan of the whole consultant talk of we want to be a trusted business partner, blah, 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 because it kind of loses impact with people and actually what is a trusted business partner. And I think relevancy for me is something that defines it quite key. It's relevant to the team, it's relevant to the business, and actually you can define and describe how that is. I'm not somebody who is interested in coming in and leading a team who are just going to push the handle, do BAU activity, drive some more RFPs through. It would bore me, really, so it's kind of not really where my sweet spot is. So it's all about how do we adapt and become relevant to the organization. I think failure, Jackie kind of touched on it earlier on clearly a slightly more impressive level, but failure is not a bad thing. And if you are going to think big, as I talked about earlier, and really try and drive big outcomes, you are not going to get everything right. No one ever is. And so it's all about really how do we learn from that? How do you accept that we may have failed on something? How do we go for plan B, plan C, plan D? And how do we learn from that moving forward? Because I think that does become an iterative process. And I'd probably like to think that when I did change, 10 years ago, I have learned from that and been able to overcome some of the mistakes probably that I made at that time. And then really just some final, just to sum that up really. So I think with transformation, it's not a single activity. I think it has to be a constant evolution. Really, it's kind of how I see my role about how do you continue to evolve. I think you need to have a purpose, really. So what is the purpose? Why are we actually doing this? And people that has to resonate with people. So there are some clear pieces about why are we changing? Change for the sake of change invariably will fail because you've not been able to resonate that with people. You've got to sell the dream, but I think not oversell it. So I think, again, we can get guilty sometimes of telling everybody they're going to have this amazing Amazon-like experience, and there's a reason why Amazon are extremely good at what they do. And the reality is that isn't what we offer because we put lots of obstacles and cost centers and lots of other things in the way of them in our organization. So I think you've got to sell that dream and you've got to get people to a level, but don't overpromise what you can actually drive, and then very much focus on delivery. So it's really about focus on, that's where you'll get your credibility from. The selling the dream lasts you for a period of time, but after a period, everybody's bored of seeing the PowerPoints, they're bored of talking about the same things, and they want to see it in action. Cool. And that was it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nick. I just want to start, well, I know we do have some questions up on the screen because I've got them here on my iPad as well. But one that I had was, now I mentioned in your intro that you've worked at 7 different companies, 7 different industries. So do you think that sort of varied career journey and that background actually gives you a better understanding of procurement?
I guess for me personally, yes, I think it's helped because ultimately all industries do things well, all companies do things well, but they do things not so well as well. And I think it's really trying to learn from that. I mean, what I have found is that pharmaceutical and financial services are very similar because you've got the regulatory environment, you've got the third-party risk that's very similar. So, but I think being able to bring that, and it also keeps me interested, I think building on that curiosity piece, I want to keep learning as well. And you learn through, if I went into another pharma organisation and just did the same thing again, it doesn't really excite me to get out of bed in the morning, if I'm honest. So it was really about me challenging myself and me learning moving forward.
I think you're right. I think you can take like best practice that you learn in one industry or one company and then translate that into another company as well.
You can. I think the one thing you've got to be careful of, and again, I'm very mindful of it, is not saying, in this company we did this, because people start to get a bit annoyed by it. Yeah. So you kind of got to think about, you can do it for probably the first couple of months, and then eventually you've got to start to evolve the messaging.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, let's go down to the second question there. If not the financial industry, which has been the most challenging?
I wouldn't say any particularly challenging. I think they've all got their own, as I said, I think their own intricacies. You've got the regulatory environment in pharmaceutical and financial services. FMCG, it was all about delivery because it was a B2B FMCG as well, so it was very fast-paced. Yeah. Media, so I worked for one of the newspaper companies, so it was all about getting papers out. And then I started off in automotive many moons ago, which was a great grounding to give me. And actually what they do in automotive is put a lot of pressure on you at a very young age. So when you've got 1,000 people with their hands in the pockets because your supplier hasn't delivered, you know about it fairly quickly and you get fairly broad shoulders. So I think they've all, I wouldn't say any have found the most challenging. I think you've just got to adapt to different arenas, really.
Yeah. Okay, and obviously focusing finally on your current role with Santander, do you think that red tape in the FinServ industry limits or hinders innovation?
So it's a big thing, I guess, we're going through now, and that's one of the reasons I think we talked about that we've taken on more scope, which basically is the whole end-to-end supply chain. And that's kind of one of the reasons, is my view is we need to become more, we need to become easier to work with. We need to become that kind of more a customer of choice, because all the banks are obviously after the fintech organizations, they're after that specific, and we're ultimately not easy to deal with. So I think what I'm obviously trying to do, and I think that probably is where it's helping me from other industries, is how do we still have the regulatory oversight and structure that we need, but in a slightly more agile way in terms of that we can start to operate. So I haven't got the magic wand for it at this moment, but it's something that is very, very hard. Well, it's pushed to me on a very hard level regularly by stakeholders. So
yeah, I can imagine. Any burning questions from the floor before we move on? I can't see any now. I think we've covered them all in the app here. So Nick, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you.